Let me ask you something. When you think about going to the gym, do you call that exercise or do you call it movement? One of the things that really changed my relationship with workouts was shifting from thinking of my life in terms of how many times per week I exercised to thinking about how much I moved on any given day or any given week. This video is going to be a little bit more of a heart-to-heart. I'm going to talk about three sort of reasons that I struggled with exercise frequency in the past and how this shift from exercise to movement really helped. My name is Dr. Karin Nordin. I have a PhD focused on health behavior change. So I help people close the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. And I'm also a person who has experienced that gap. I grew up with a lot of difficulty to self-regulate, to control my behavior, to move myself in the direction of my goals. And so I've been there. I experienced that struggle. And it wasn't until I got my PhD and I started learning the real science and not just the bullshit tips that are watered down all over the internet that I was able to start applying them in a compassionate way, in an empowering way, and I was able to truly transform my own life. Let's dig into the shift from focusing on exercise to focusing on movement and one of the reasons why that really resonated with me. I'm just gonna do a little trigger warning here that I am gonna discuss kind of like diet culture and intentional weight loss and my experience with those things. So if you don't wanna hear about that, just move on to another video. So I grew up not very athletic at all. I was not in any kind of sports. I was totally like a bookworm, a nerd. But when I got into high school, actually even before I got into high school, I remember being in 5th grade and wanting to wear baggy shirts to school because I thought that my stomach was too pudgy. And that diet culture, I grew up in the 90s, right? So a lot of us that grew up in the 90s had this like thin ideal. One of the things that I learned very early on was that exercise was a way to lose weight. So in college, I would go to the gym and I would do like 45 minutes on the elliptical or 45 minutes on the treadmill. And my only concern would be how many calories I burned in that specific workout. I didn't care about getting faster or stronger. I didn't care about heart health or longevity. I literally just cared about weight loss. And so that created this association in my brain where exercise equals weight loss equals Karin's body is bad equals shame. So I had this deep connection, which I honestly think a lot of us do, which is why I'm talking about it. I had this deep connection between exercise and feelings of shame. And it was specifically that word, exercise. Even like workouts, I think were connected to that feeling for me. So how did I make the shift to where I'm at today? And today I have like a really healthy, empowering relationship with exercise. One of the things I did was go to therapy for 5 or 6 years. So if you are a person who thinks that this might be a pattern that you have in your past, this is something that you would need to discuss with a therapist. But the second thing I did is when I was in this process of reshaping my relationship with exercise, I focused way more on movement and counting all forms of movement. So tidying was movement, and walking was movement, and gentle yoga was movement, and stretching was movement. And as soon as I focused on incorporating more movement in my life, even if that didn't mean 45 minutes or getting sweaty or like doing an all-out workout at the gym, that made an enormous difference. And so that kind of brings me to point 2, is that if you are struggling with exercise consistency, I wonder how rigid your definition of exercise is. And this was even something that came up for me last year. So last year I was training for a powerlifting meet and I got to this point in the year where I was so burnt out and I did not, like the thought of doing another bench press or squat, I couldn't imagine anything worse. And I realized that my definition of exercise or of movement had sort of gotten narrowed down. So I had done all this work of expanding it, and then all of a sudden my brain was only counting it as movement if I moved in a specific way. It only counted as a workout if it was like a 1 hour top to bottom powerlifting workout. So what I did last year is I actually did, and I've talked about this on other videos, is I did 30 days of movement. And I dropped temporarily my powerlifting goal. I did end up competing at a meet later that year, but I dropped my goal completely and I just said, hey, I am going to release all of my, specific definitions of what movement looks like, and I'm going to count more and more and more and more. So if you're having trouble, if you're not a frequent exerciser, first of all, join us inside Change Academy this month because we're going to talk even more about this kind of stuff. But second of all, expand your definition. Work on your cognitive flexibility. And people are always asking me like, Karin, how do I become more flexible? I am an all or nothing thinker. Let me ask you this. How do you become more flexible? You stretch. Stretching mentally looks like getting yourself to do 30 minutes of gentle stretching, even though your brain protests, even though you don't like it, even though it makes you feel uncomfortable because it's not hard enough. Your brain is going to make up a huge fight, and trust me, my brain has done this as well, but that is the way we cognitively stress ourselves, and that is the way we become more flexible. We do the thing, and we mentally adjust the way we're thinking about it. And so that brings me to point number 3, which is kind of the way I think about exercise and movement now that has been really empowering for me. And that is that I think about exercise and movement as a trampoline, okay? And not a literal trampoline, but a metaphorical trampoline. So a trampoline is able to create movement. It's able to springboard something because it has a combination of structure and flexibility. The middle part of it is flexible, which creates that springiness, but the outside of it is structured. So what I do now in my life, I tell myself, we're going to do 30 minutes of movement every day. I give myself that structure. But inside of that structure, I give myself the most flexibility of what that movement looks like, of when that movement happens, of what counts as that particular type of movement, and even to some extent on the time. If I start a workout and I get 16 minutes in and I'm like really done and really tired, I give myself the flexibility to stop that workout and abandon it for the day. That's the lesson I want to impress upon you, and this actually applies to any kind of behavior change that you're looking for, which is, where do you need more structure and where do you need more flexibility? If you resonated with any of this, I would love to hear about it in the comments. I know that diet culture and early associations with exercise and weight loss are something that a lot of us deal with, and so it kind of helps to hear and see other people comment that they have experienced the same thing. And if you're a person who is struggling and you want to move more in your life, but you are looking for an empowering way to learn to do that, number 1, I highly encourage you to join us this month inside of Change Academy. But number 2, I definitely want you to go watch my other videos on workout frequency, when to work out. I've done several of them this month because they are going to give you some tools and tips and tricks that don't involve me just screaming at you like, be disciplined, make it a habit, or all the other like toxic self-help advice that you've probably heard out there. I will link those videos in the end screen here, and I will see you next week.